Hey guys, I'm Amber. I decided to create a storybook using a website called Story Jumper to create my fable. And I wrote this fable to kind of illustrate the idea of the golden rule that we kind of all learned when we were little. And first I'm going to kind of go through this book that I made, and after we can kind of talk about it, discuss the themes, discuss like the character analysis, and also kind of connect the text to the ideas within. And yeah, so the golden rule. The little fish was waking up one day from a mid-afternoon nap. He decided he was ready to go for lunch and came out of the coral reef he calls home. But unknowingly, the big fish behind him was ready for lunch as well. As soon as the little fish realized he was about to be the food for the big fish, he began bargaining for his life. "Please spare me, large fish. Let me go, and I could help you one day." The big fish laughed at the request, but out of hunger he did not have time to bargain with the little fish and left to seek food elsewhere. A few weeks later, the little fish was on a morning swim when he noticed a squirming worm in the water. Although it looked yummy to the little fish, he knew it was too large of a meal for just him, so he started to swim away. As the little fish was swimming away, he heard a yell behind him. Help me," cried the big fish. He was attached to a shiny hook that he could not get free from. A fisherman must have trapped him. Remembering that the big fish spared his life, the little fish swam as fast as he could over to the big fish and began nudging him until the big fish was free from the hook. "Why did you help me?" asked the big fish. "You could have left me there." "I know," said the little fish, "but you helped me, so I wanted to help you." So that's it. Pretty short, but it's to the point. It kind of shows the golden rule, which, if any of you guys don't know, the golden rule is kind of treating others the way you want to be treated. So the little fish thought if the big fish is treating him by sparing him his life, the little fish should do so as well if there was ever an opportunity to. So now I have a PowerPoint, and I'll kind of just be going over the Johnson text. And let me just, oops, okay. So I decided to first do somewhat of a character analysis using different types of ethical qualities and characteristics located in Johnson to truly understand what I was getting at with the whole golden rule theme. After this, I plan on connecting the reasoning of the fable to Fluker and going more into detail about the entirety of the message. So in Chapter 3 of Johnson, called The Leader's Characters, there's a lot of information discussing the elements of character, whether it be elements of a character as a follower or as a leader. Many of these elements, such as temperance, wisdom, justice, integrity, and compassion, can be exemplified in the fish's character in my fable. So temperance can be exemplified through the little fish. The little fish had to control his emotions when the big fish was stuck on the hook. Although the big fish was going to eat him, the little fish had to see past that in order to save him from the hook. Since temperance is all about controlling oneself, the little fish had to control his fear or his vengeance-type attitude that he could have had in order to save the big fish. The little fish also showed wisdom by seeking his benefit. He realized that if he were able to help the big fish, he would most likely be able to use that to his benefit at a later time. He is wise in the sense that he was sensitive and respectful to the big fish when bargaining for his life, as well as when he was saved by the big fish. The little fish also expressed integrity. Integrity, in essence, is practicing what you preach. When the little fish said that one day he could benefit the big fish, he meant it. Even though at the time he assumed that he would never actually be in an instance where he would be able to help the big fish, the little fish thought he would promise it regardless. And he knew all along that if he would be true to his word, if there ever was a situation to allow him to do so. I think both of the fish exemplified compassion. Although the little fish definitely did exemplify it more so, I think that overall both fish expressed an overall kindness and compassion. Whether or not the big fish was compassionate out of hunger or not is unknown, but whatever the case is, he still showed slight compassion towards the little fish. And on the other side, the little fish showed compassion by demonstrating his integrity and perseverance to get the big fish off the hook. Most importantly, however, the little fish expressed an element of justice. As Johnson said, justice has two components. The first is a sense of obligation to the common good. The second is the fair and equal treatment of others. Both of these components the little fish lived up to. I think that justice can be related to the golden rule I was trying to get at in the fable. Ever since I was little, I always have had teachers tell our class to live up to the golden rule. For any of you who do not know what this is, it's just the act of treating the others the way you would want to be treated, as I said before. So in a sense, exemplifying justice allows us to consider your own interest while also looking to others' best interest as well. The little fish thought that everyone would have to be fair. If the big fish spared his life, the little fish knew for a fact that he would have to owe him at some point or another. Now, if we look at Chapter 5 of Johnson, called Ethical Perspectives, we can see the different types of approaches in which each fish could have fallen into. Firstly, both of the fish fall under Kant's categorical imperative, which is do what's right no matter the cost. In this approach, you do what's right regardless of the consequence. You do what everyone else would want to do because the decision made would have to include everyone as it's the right thing to do. In this approach, the golden rule applies. You make decisions which would apply to everyone and the decisions are based on how you would want to make those decisions. Just like the golden rule, based on how you would want to be treated is how you treat others. The little fish applies to this approach because the little fish is constantly asking himself if he would want everyone else to make the same choice and demonstrate respect for others, especially the big fish, which are all applications of this approach according to Johnson. Another approach type that the big fish and little fish fall under is justice as fairness, which is explained as guaranteeing equal rights and opportunities behind the veil of ignorance. The application of this approach involves following fairness guidelines, weighing both individual freedoms, and stepping behind the veil of ignorance when faced with a decision. The little fish exemplified this because he was fair. He was spared his life, so he spared the big fish's life. It all played out to be consistently fair. He also did not allow ignorance to mask his view towards making the decision to save the big fish or not. The golden rule is all about being fair to another person and ditching any ignorances or preconceptions that may shield us to treating someone else in a fair manner. The little fish also exemplified the approach of altruism. I think that's how it's pronounced, so bear with me. The explanation of it, according to Johnson, says that our actions should be designed to help others, whatever the personal cost. These type of people or fish possess characteristics of compassion and empathy. The little fish exemplified this because he was being a good Samaritan by helping the big fish off the hook. He could have easily swam by and considered himself safe from the predator from now on, but instead he put those ideas behind him and saved the big fish despite the cost. If we now look at Chapter 9 of Johnson to look at the ethical contexts, we kind of look at how organizations create an ethical climate. So for the sake of the fable, we can look at the ocean as the climate in which ethicality must be initiated. The ethical context of trust is what was important about this chapter when applying it to the fable. Johnson says that those who value trust typically communicate a clear sense of vision and mission, foster an atmosphere that encourages openness and sharing, are consistent in their behavior, demonstrate caring, follow through on promises and commitments, and so forth. This is important because the type of characters in this fable definitely intertwine to result in an increased sense of trust. Trust is so important because any type of leadership and followership, because it allows us to collaborate and communicate much more effectively and efficiently. So now that I've done a character analysis of both of the fish from the fable I made, I think it's important to understand the reasoning as to why fables are so helpful to us. When we first were assigned a fable to discuss, I kind of had no clue the reasoning behind it. But after looking up many different fables, I understand the connection between ethicality and the storylines between the two. Johnson truly allowed us to understand terminology of ethicality that was integrated into leadership. But Fluker, on the other hand, allows us to witness and truly reflect in ethicality with as many stories, connections, and examples. This allowed me to reflect and come up with the conclusion that these fables we are doing are exemplifying a way of doing ethics. We are utilizing the way of the storyteller to relate to an ethical issue at hand, just as Fluker had mentioned. We are using the way of the storyteller through the story we are telling in our fables to thoroughly describe ethics and create an ethical model. I chose to really go into detail about the golden rule because I feel that it's a stressed idea within our community that is brought up at even a young age. Implementing the golden rule is essentially implementing ethicality, and it doesn't even matter if you're being a leader or a follower in that case. These stories are creating meaning to ethical life and practice and are used to promote truth. Although these stories are more just opinions and our own way of looking at ethics, it truly helps us to understand how others express ethicality in their community. So that's kind of all I have for you. I think that I kind of went into detail about Johnson and Fluker, and Johnson just really came across to me when I was kind of going through it as more of a way to connect my characters to it, whereas whereas Fluker really allowed me to really reflect on how this fable had affected the ethicality that we've been stressing throughout this semester. So here are my references, and thank you.